Hello out there, AP World Historians. This is your AP World History teacher, Ben Osborne. So glad to be here in our brand new unit. I hope you're as excited as I am. I always like it when we're getting on to new stuff and changing things up a little bit. We are looking now at Unit 3, specifically 3.1, Expansion of Empire. So let's go ahead and take a look. We'll talk a little bit about sort of what we're looking at for this new unit and like how that new unit's going to work, like what our time periods are and stuff, and then we'll go through the actual content of this unit. All right, so the first thing for us to understand here, just a little introduction kind of thing. This unit's going to begin our big time period, our second time period. So that new time period is 1450 to 1750. So Unit 3 and 4 are both going to be in this time period. So our big change here is the European exploration and colonization of the Americas. Columbus sails the ocean blue in 1492, right? But before even that, we have other Europeans exploring in other parts of Africa and around into Asia. And then, of course, there will become the process of the Spanish settlement and conquest of the Americas. So it's not like an overnight process. It's not like in 1492 things change all of a sudden. That's kind of why they do 1450 instead of like 1492 or something. It's kind of a nice general time period for us to take a look at major changes that are just about to take place. But one of the things to remember is that Unit 3, right? Before and during this time, many empires built their strength on the land. I like the idea that, in a sense, if the Europeans had not explored and conquered, this may be the world that we would be looking at, right? Like a world of these sort of massively powerful and important empires maybe would have changed things in a big way. This unit is about those places and also a little bit about Europe before the impact of the American colonization is felt. So it's a little bit about things like what do you call it? About like European governments, like absolutism versus constitutionalism. It's a bit about the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation and a couple other things as well. So our silly colors that we have this time around is going to be green for the land, for land-based empires. Not incredibly creative, but hey, it works when you're really dealing with, you got 9 units and you only have a certain number of colors. So there you go. All right, well, let's check it out. Unit 3.1. All right. So 3.1 is about expansion, right? So like one of the things about this unit, you can do this unit where like you're just doing each individual empire, but they encourage us not to do that because we want to like compare them and contrast them as well. So it works better to kind of just do them like in these units like this. So the first one really is about expansion, like how these empires kind of were created and built up over time. But this is the section where we're going to do a little bit of general information about them. So like politics, lands, where are they located, stuff like that, right? Later sections, so 3.2, which we'll be doing very soon, are about administration and beliefs in those empires. And so those things are going to come just a little bit later. One of the big things here that we need to remember is that gunpowder is what's so important. Gunpowder invented by the Chinese, but kind of perfected in a sense by other groups like the Europeans as well as the people of the Middle East, to the point where it became a actual like military weapon of a sort, right? So gunpowder is going to allow these empires to expand using strong militaries. What qualifies as a gunpowder empire is debatable. You're going to see a bunch of stuff on the internet. If you say like gunpowder empires, typically people will only talk about those 3 Islamic ones, so the Safavids, Ottomans, and Mughals. But a lot of people also include others, so the Russia, the Qing, etc. You will sometimes see like Songhai and Japan included, even though gunpowder is a pretty minor part of their empires. So if you get a question on the AP test that's asking about gunpowder empires, your safest bets are Ottoman, Safavids, and Mughals. A very safe bet would be Russia, Qing, and Qing, and then otherwise it's a little more iffy after that. But that's just something to think about. These land-based empires will reach their highest points of power just before European sea power becomes super, super important. Here we got a little map, care of Freemanpedia, that shows us a little bit about where these empires are at the time. So our big ones here we're going to be talking about are kind of above me here. There is the Qing Dynasty, there is the Mughals, there is the Safavids there with Isfahan, then we have the Ottomans and the Russians as well. This map also includes Songhai over there in West Africa with capital like Gao, though they kind of show up a little bit later, like they're going to show up in kind of like 3.3 and other places. We're not going to talk as much about them earlier on. And then they also include like the Incas over there as well as the Aztecs. Again, not ones that we're going to mention in huge amounts, but definitely there. And then lastly, way over here that way, right above me there is going to be the Japanese. So Tokugawa Shogunate, which we'll talk a little bit about. All right, let's talk about Russia first. Obviously, I'm recording this in September 2022. We got all kinds of craziness going on with that Ukrainian-Russian conflict at the moment. But, you know, we have this really interesting sort of long-term question about Russia that I think is important even more now than ever, which is Russia more European or more Asian in a sense? So what the problem is here, the thought here is that when the Mongols invade and attack, they pull the Russian people away from Europe in a sense because they are dominating and controlling them. So their money, like some of the influence and stuff, is going towards the east instead. And in a way, the Mongol conquest is going to prevent Russia from becoming, in this period at least, fully integrated with the European, area there, right? So one of the big kind of questions in Russian history is, are they European or Asian? So we will see things like Peter the Great will try to, he will force people to cut their beards off, right? And Catherine will try to make them even more European than they would be otherwise. But then they're also moving back towards the other groups as well. It's a little bit, I don't know, it's a little bit kind of weird to say it this way, but some historians talk about the idea of, democratic sort of Western Europe versus a more autocratic like, China or something like that. And that Russia is being pulled in both those directions. And we can see today with like Putin and his more autocratic ways that perhaps in some senses they, are more towards that side of things. But again, that's not really our purpose right now, just something that you'll see come up repeatedly over time as we talk about Russia. Ivan IV, also known as Ivan the Terrible, was crowned in 1547. The thing about it is that terrible in this context means more like kind of like awesome, like powerful, really, like like terrible, like terrifying or something, or strict. He definitely is pretty bad, like in a lot of ways. He does a lot of horrible stuff. But just so you know, it's not like they're calling him a horrible person during his reign or anything like that. Well, I mean, some people are calling him that, but that's not what the name is that they go by. He is going to end up taking over a little bit after Ivan III, Ivan the Great, who will bring the Russians out from control of the Mongols, or the Tatars as they call them. And then he will start to expand the polity of Russia towards eastward, mainly relying on things like gunpowder to help make that work. He is going to use these guys called Cossacks, or Peasant Warriors. Basically what they're going to do is they are going to allow serfs freedom if they agree to move to a certain location. And the process of doing that, like to colonize basically. In the process of doing that, they learn like, combat skills, and they end up becoming sort of these powerful warriors. And they are going to fight local tribes and also Khans that are in the areas of Siberia, like former Mongol Khans, like little tiny Mongol Khans and stuff to take over. Not tiny as in small. Tiny as in like not that powerful. He will end up gaining control of the Volga River, which will end up promoting more trade so that Russia is able to become a bigger part of the world. By 1639, Russians had gone all the way as far as the Pacific Ocean and eventually will, take over Alaska, and they eventually end up moving all the way down California, one of the highest, one of the furthest east, I guess you'd say, or the furthest west in our perspective, place that Russia is in a little border town that's in the north part of California. Of course, we purchase a lot of that from them, or Alaska mainly. That should be pointed out. That is Ivan the Terrible up there. For the Qing Dynasty, the Ming Dynasty will take over in 1638, reigns for about 300 years. For whatever reason, AP doesn't really talk about them as much. We'll talk more about them like near the end as we do like review and stuff. They are important, but we talked about them with Zheng He and others. But they will expand China into Mongolia and Central Asia, but eventually lose control. They will also revamp the Great Wall of China. But what happens is, in 1644, there's another kind of Mongol-ish group called the Manchus, from a place called, not surprisingly, Manchuria, who will establish a new dynasty called the Qing Dynasty. So what this is, basically, these are like we talked before about that area, like of where Mongolia is and that kind of like Siberian area. What happens is that you have these repeated examples of these local peoples, right? Like the Huns, the Mongols, the Jurchen at one point do the same thing, the Manchus. And what they do is they end up getting their stuff together, and then they organize themselves and they start kind of fighting and stuff. So the Manchu are able to invade at a point when the Ming Dynasty is at its weakest. They overthrow them, and they will be in charge from 1644 until 1911. This will be the last of the Chinese dynasties. So far, who knows? But these are the last of the imperial dynasties that we're going to talk about. Two important leaders here. Again, don't forget I'm terrible at pronouncing Chinese names. Emperor Kangshi, who had a very, very long reign. He will expand into Taiwan, Mongolia, and Tibet, basically modern-day China's borders, debatable on Tibet, on Taiwan, but those areas are going to be based upon his conquests. Emperor Qianlong will expand west of China, which will lead to the annexation of a place called Xinjiang and the Uyghur people. That word is pronounced Uyghurs. Okay, this has become a controversial issue lately. The American State Department talks a lot about how these folks are being particularly abused by the Chinese government right now. They are Muslims in a place where that's not as acceptable in China, and so they're in like, there's reports of like them being rounded up into camps and stuff. If you remember that live action Mulan movie from a few years ago, it got a lot of heat because they filmed part of it in the province of Xinjiang, even though all this kind of stuff was going on. So anyway, little connection to the modern day there for you. So there you go. That is sort of the Qing Dynasty in 1850. We'll talk more about it later, but you can see it is basically modern-day China, right? So we have Manchuria. They don't control Outer Mongolia, what they call Outer Mongolia today. That is the country of Mongolia, that they do have a lot of influence on it. And then you can see that western province there, Xinjiang. We also have Tibet and Taiwan over there, though, of course, that also is not exactly under their control anymore. But there we have our two friends, the two emperors, Kangshi as well as Qianlong, wearing kind of traditional Manchu garb. All right, next up, I love this picture of Mehmed II. Like he looks, I'm sorry, that's Suleiman I. He looks like he's kind of like doing a little pose there. Like, oh, me? Well, thank you. It's so nice to meet you. The Ottomans here, modern-day Turkey, Balkans and Europe, North Africa, Southeast Asia. These dudes are everywhere, all throughout the Middle East and parts of Europe and stuff. It's the largest and most enduring of the Islamic empires of the era. I would say probably the largest and most enduring of almost any empires. Like, this thing's around forever. Basically 600-something years or so, they are around until 1918, 1920 at the end of World War I. Mehmed II is going to lay siege to Constantinople in 1453, uses this gigantic 26-foot bronze cannon to help knock down some walls, and then he will take over control. So Constantinople becomes Istanbul and the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. They will reach their peak under Suleiman I, who will besiege Vienna. So they go all the way to Austria, basically, and are almost able to take it, but are unable to do so during his lifetime, at least. Here you can see these collections here of these different groups. These are the Gunpowder Empires, the Muslim Gunpowder Empires. So if you look at the very top up there, you'll see Russia, right? Gigantic Russia, then the Qing Dynasty over to the right. And then we have in the mid-17th century at least, we have our three Islamic Gunpowder Empires. So that's the Ottomans over there we were just talking about. We'll talk about the Safavids and the Mughals in a second. But you see the Ottomans are gigantic. Like, this is the highest point that they're at, but it is huge. Like, they're all the way up into Europe. They're all the way through North Africa. They have an enormous amount of territory. Then we have the Safavids. They are effectively about half of modern-day Iraq, as well as Iran, as well as a little bit of, like, Pakistan and, like, Afghanistan and stuff. And then lastly, the Mughals, which are going to be modern-day India, a little bit of Pakistan, modern-day Bangladesh, places like that. So big, huge, powerful empires. All right, let's talk about the Safavids. Now, you may have heard of the Ottomans before. If not, they're wonderful places to put your feet. And maybe the Mughals, I don't know, but you probably haven't heard of the Safavids. They're a little shorter lasting, and they don't have quite as much impact in some ways as some of the others. Like the Ottomans are going to like fight in World War I, so they have a lot of European relevance. The Mughals will also, fight against the British, so some relevance there. But the Safavids don't really last that long necessarily. So they're located again in modern-day Iran and Iraq. Their origin is in what's called the Safavid order of Sufism, which is established in northern Azerbaijan. So this is a specific type of Sufism. It's associated with what's called Twelver Shiism. So again, we have Sunnis and we have Shia, right? Based upon this question of who is supposed to be in charge. The Shia are the smaller group. Something like 80%, 85% of modern day Muslims are Sunnis. Okay, then in addition to that, Shiism has its own little splits, and the biggest one is this one called Twelver Shiism, which is about 85% of Shias. Okay, so 85% of Muslims are, 15% of Muslims are Shia, 85% of Shia are Twelvers. And you don't really need to know too much detail about this, but effectively what it is that it is a belief that there are 12 leaders or imams, and that the last one is sort of like gone for a while, but he's gonna come back. It's called he's called the Mahdi, and he will come back eventually one day. This is the most popular branch of Shiism today, again, and it has a lot of adherents and a lot of followers. So the leader of the Safavids then is a guy named Ismail, and at 14 or 15 conquered all of Iran and was proclaimed Shah in 1501. What are you kids doing? He was only 15. Land-based military power, emphasis on Shia Islam, caused frequent hostilities with the Ottoman Empire, which was Sunni. Okay, so these two sides, like we oftentimes in the West tend to think of Islam as being the sort of one unified thing, that's it, they all agree with each other, but that could not be farther from the case. In this way, the two of them fought each other nearly constantly, Sunnis versus Shia, trying to decide who's going to be in charge. And generally speaking, the Ottomans are going to win a lot of these battles, but where this conflict lives on in Iraq and Iran today, because like the areas that were under the Ottoman Empire are kind of more Iraq, whereas the areas under the Safavids are more Iran. And so those two fight against each other a lot, and we end up having wars against each other. They end up having wars against each other for quite a long period of time. All right, Ismail's mustache game is on point. Check that bad boy out. You could probably put a beverage on top of that thing, and it would probably balance just fine. He's got a little cup there. That's kind of the way people used to drink sometimes, as little, like, shallow bowls. Over there on the right, you can see the Safavid Empire. It's kind of a weird map. I liked it because it was sort of, like, nice looking. But you can see, again, it's mostly modern-day Iran, and the capital up there in the north. All right, let's talk about our Mughals. All right, the Mughals are located in modern India and Pakistan. We're going to talk about them for quite a bit because they will come back again, specifically when we're talking about British expansion. Located in modern-day India, Pakistan, also Bangladesh. Founded by Babur, a descendant of Tamerlane, so that guy who had that sort of crazy little empire around the 1100s or 1200s. He is descended from that guy, and that's the name Mongols. Mughal Mongols, you get it? Not Muggles. This is not Harry Potter. Under Akbar, who was one of the richest and best governed states in the world, oversaw trading via Arab traders and flourished and expanded this empire enormously. One thing that's interesting, though, is that even though this is a Muslim empire, the caste system was still fairly strong because the local Hindus wanted it to stay strong. All right, here we go. Some beautiful pictures here. Check this out. That's Babur over there. Also a beautiful little mustache going there. Over on the left, you can see the growth of this empire. So the little lines at the top, that is going to be the beginning of the empire under Babur in 1525. So that's where he comes from. Then he will invade. He actually had his empire stolen from him. He was supposed to have an empire sort of up here in this Hindu Kush area, and like his uncle or somebody took it away from him, and he's like, fine, I'll just go conquer India then. So in 1605, then his grandson, Akbar will take control of a large portion there, and then later on, one of his future family members, Aurangzeb, will add even more. So eventually, during his lifetime, it will become absolutely enormous. Sorry, not during his lifetime, but during the lifetime of his family, it will become absolutely enormous. All right. That is it right there. I'm going to stop looking at this amazing man here. Look, I'm going to look right up at him. Hey, how's it going, friend? That is the Mughals there for you. That is the beginnings of these. We will talk about all these folks again when we talk about 3.2 and 3.3, as we talk about how they run their empires and other stuff like that as well. So put a pin in it here. We'll come back to them very, very soon. Thanks so much for paying attention. Appreciate it, and y'all be good.